The news broke yesterday morning because they sent around the agenda for next week's ownership meeting, and one of the items on the agenda is approving Daniel Snyder's request to exceed the NFL's team-by-team debt limit so he can buy out the 40% or thereabouts held by his three limited partners who have been trying desperately to sell for more than a year because they don't want to do business with Daniel Snyder anymore. It turned ugly. There have been arbitrations. There's been litigation. And now Daniel Snyder acquiring the money necessary by being permitted to go above the debt limit put in place for every team to borrow and buy out these guys. And the big takeaway is this, Chris.
Yeah.
The fact that the league is poised to let him do it is being interpreted as a clear message that however this ongoing investigation of workplace misconduct over a period of years with the Washington football team ends, it won't end with Daniel Snyder being forced to sell. And you may remember a few weeks ago, there was a leak from at least a draft report of a recommendation from attorney Beth Wilkinson that Snyder be pressured, forced, required to sell. That's likely not happening because of the fact that they've empowered him to borrow the money necessary to buy these other guys out.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. I mean, you know, all of it's interesting. I think the first thing I'd like to ask you just is like, yeah, I mean, why? How does the NFL get behind it with like this, a lot of this stuff still pending, I guess is what I'm a little surprised by to a degree. You know, I know it seems like the owners feel like Daniel Snyder might not be as wrong as maybe we think he is or he's been portrayed to be. What, do they have info we don't? Go ahead, tell me.
I think that from the beginning, the vibe has been they're not going to make him sell. So this isn't inconsistent with just the sense I've gotten, the people I know, the people I talk to. There's never been any type of a groundswell, even though he's not one of the more popular owners. I think there's a concern of throwing stones from the porch of a glass house, of but for the grace of God, go we, that they may be establishing a standard in Washington that all of a sudden starts getting applied to
everybody.
And I ain't going to name names, but look, you're talking about billionaires who are used to being catered to, who are used to getting what they want, when they want, how they want, and that doesn't mean that anyone's crossed the line. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But
this opens Pandora's box, and you don't want to let her out, is what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
And I remember when Jerry Richardson handed the keys over. He wasn't forced. He was done. He didn't have any heirs he was going to give the team to. See, Snyder wants to keep the team because he wants to give it to his kids. Richardson was just going to end up selling it through his estate when he died. So here comes this, and it's horrifying, and it's mortifying, and he has that facade of Southern gentleman. The last thing he's going to do is get into a big, ugly fight with anybody. He says, I'll sell the team. And what a punishment he got, $2 billion for the franchise he founded back in 1995 for an expansion fee, a hell of a lot less than that. And I think that situation scared some folks. But the idea that the league would create a precedent that it will force an owner to sell based upon things that any of them could be accused of. And then you got to go back 15, 20 years, however many years, and ask yourself, well, who's going to come out of the woodwork and put pressure on me now? And I got to worry about having to sell my team. No, thank you. We're not crossing that bridge.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, Mike. That, you know, I didn't really think of that aspect because that's where as a fan, and I don't get into all the legal stuff all the time like that. I mean, that's your ballpark, and you're awesome at it. I like picking your brain about it, but I just found it curious. You know, I did, and especially with all, you know, again, the players always being held to protect the shield, all of that type of stuff. You know, I sometimes do find this stuff a little hypocritical when it comes to
Chris,
but I know.
He may be suspended, he may be fined. I mean, there's been no player that I can think of other than the indefinite suspensions arising under the drug policy that I strongly disagree with.
Yeah.
Even then, the player can come back.
Right.
The idea
Right.
of forcing an owner to sell is a lifetime ban. And I can't think of any player who's had a lifetime ban. Ray Rice had a de facto lifetime ban because they shoved him out and nobody would bring him back.
Right.
And frankly, if he was, a star player at the time this all happened, he would have been back. We know how that goes.
Right.
But it's an extreme outcome, and I don't think the owners want to stretch the rubber band that far, because then it could potentially be stretched that far for one of them at some point in the future, and it's just something else to worry about.
What about?
And I really think that's why it's not going to that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Mike. When you said it, I went, "Oh, that's exactly what it is." I mean, it kind of like the light bulb went on in my head. What about like the amount he paid for the team? Like, is that looked for that 40%? I didn't realize he only had 60% of the team. I don't know why. I thought he had a bigger percentage of the football team, but $950 million. At this point, is that value? What is that like?
Well,
yeah, what does that look at?
I saw someone else report it's 875. Either way, we're talking about a $2 billion to $2.4 billion total valuation, but the minority interests aren't as valuable as the majority interest, because what do you really have? That's one of the reasons why these guys want it out. What do you really have?
Yeah.
You don't have any control.
Right.
You don't have any voting rights. You have no path to purchasing majority interest in the team. It's just an investment that lets you hobnob with some movers and shakers when, even though you're a mover and shaker in other industries, this piece of the team you hold doesn't mean jack squat. So those shares are worth less than what they'd be worth on the open market. $2.5 billion total valuation, I think, is inaccurate. I think the 60% that Snyder already held is worth a lot more. And if you can sell the full 100 to someone at some point, if that's what you choose to do, you're going to get a hell of a lot more out of it. I was told by somebody last year that I trust that the gambling proliferation, legalization, how it's going to spread, all the different ways they're going to find to make money off of gambling is going to result in teams being worth between $8 and $10 billion sooner rather than later.
Wow, that's unreal. I mean, again, I'd like to see the Washington football team kind of get back on the right track. This was a good year for them last year, 2020. I mean, as far as the team, I know Daniel Snyder had his own issues, and, hopefully this can get figured out either way, but I do like football when they're relevant. I do. I've always been a fan of the Washington franchise just because I grew up in the NFCs. That's what I've seen. And I wonder, Ron Rivera certainly seems like he's settled things down. I'd wish they'd move out of that dumb stadium they are in the middle of nowhere and get back to the D.C. area and do something like that. But, good for Daniel Snyder. Now he controls the whole football team, and we'll see if he can get some of this other stuff under control.
And I will say this on the way to break, and this is just an expression of my opinion. I was in that stadium for an international soccer match. We went to go see Lionel Messi play, and all we did was see him sit on the bench. Shocker. That place is a dump. It is a complete and total dump. And I'm amazed it's only 25 years or so old. It feels like it's been around as long as the Roman Colosseum.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.